Everywhere you go is Lincoln. Lincoln, Lincoln, Lincoln. Even cost us a Lincoln to buy a drink. Right, if you, like me, used to find it odd that when they marched into battle they actually had instruments and bands, did you know that sometimes the commands were pounded out in the music so the troops knew what they were supposed to do? I did not know that. This has pretty much been our weather this week. Beautiful sun and black, tornado-filled, thunder and lightning skies. Here's our tour bus for the battlefield tour, and our first stop is where day one of the battle took place. And there's a few interesting facts. Interesting enough, the north came from the south, and the south came from the north, something you wouldn't expect. Neither one of the commanders were here for the battling, and it was sort of an accidental battle. It was nothing anyone planned on or anticipated. It just sort of happened spontaneously. It was tough to get orders out then, and things got confused easily. So I guess it was a little bit confusing. And also, interestingly enough, if you did not know this, on day one the North lost. They were outnumbered, they were surrounded, and they came in as heroes through town earlier in the day, and they had to retreat back through town. They didn't quite get the same outstanding clapping and cheering that they did coming in, but I believe later in the tour we're going to find out that things changed. This is the top of what they call Little Round Top, which was pivotal in the battle. And on day two, what happened is that the North did not expect the South to be in this area. They thought they were still downtown in our day one battlefield. So it was a surprise to them when the South attacked. When the North knew that the South was attacking, what they did here is they abandoned Little Round Top by accident and tried to move forward where they thought the South was. That turned out to be a huge mistake, and General Grant got some troops back up here immediately to recapture this mound. And of course, as history goes, if they did not recapture it, the war could have ended very differently. What do you think of this tour so far?
I'll talk about it later.
This is the field in the area on day three where the infamous, I should say, Pickett's Charge happened. After day two battle, General Lee felt that the weak point of the Union Army would be right down the middle, and that's where they would plan their attack. But that didn't work out so well for them, because once they broke through the middle, they had nowhere to go, and they got attacked from all ends. And apparently the next day General Lee sent his resignation in. They didn't take it, but he took 100% credit for that miscalculation that resulted in them eventually losing this battle, which was the turning point, they say, of the Civil War. This is a monument to the New York Infantry, which was credited for saving Little Round Top as their troops rushed in as a backup to the forces that were taking fire from the Confederate soldiers down here in the valley, and this group of rocks called the Devil's Den.
Okay, this is the actual position of where sharpshooters were for the Confederacy, shooting up in the hill, up at Round Top, right up there where the Union soldiers were. The Union eventually held that spot, which is on the side of their fish hook of the area here in Gettysburg that they defended and defeated the Confederacy at Gettysburg. But right here is where there were Confederate sharpshooters, and as Beth showed you, there's a picture of a sharpshooter that lays there, which actually the picture was staged, but there was a real dead body, and this is a real spot of where the sharpshooters did shoot in the war. Hi, I'm here on Memorial Day weekend here in Gettysburg, and I'm out here in the battlefields doing all the tours. And right here today was specifically at an area called Devil's Den. And this is an area that the Union held, the Confederate held, where sharpshooters would shoot up in the hill up there at Little Round Top. And a lot of action took place here during the Civil War, but the Union held on. And I just want to tell you a quick story here at the Devil's Den. Beth's friend, when she was a teenager many years ago, was sitting up here one night with one of her girlfriends. They were both about, I think, 17 years of age. And they both looked down on the rock, and they thought they saw blood. that was right here on a rock, and then they smelled gunpowder, and they looked out and they saw a big battle of the Union and the Confederate and all kinds of action going on. And it's kind of unbelievable because then they immediately got kind of spooked and left. Now, this is a story many of you will believe, many of you just won't, but it was two people when they were a lot younger, and it's kind of an incredible story because down here in Pennsylvania there's a lot of these type of ghost stories. So very interesting, and it's for you to think about, could this have really happened where there was so much energy here in the fields?
When you think about what this battlefield looked like during the actual fighting, it's hard to comprehend. They said that the smoke was so black that you could not even see the troops in front of you. The screaming of the injured all over the place, which lasted all night nonstop. 51,000 soldiers eventually were killed or injured here. And when the war was over and the troops left, they just left the city with that, basically. Bodies to be buried. They were buried in shallow graves, and then it would rain and they would come up again. And injured, being treated inside private homes, and the husk bodies and carcasses, and the whole town was a mess. So when you think about it, it's really unfair what this poor town had to deal with. This cemetery is where Lincoln gave his famous Gettysburg address. He was asked to come and just make a few remarks at the end of a 2-hour speech by another gentleman who no one remembers, but those 2 minutes became Lincoln's legacy. Doug says if he never hears a Gettysburg address again after this trip, that's perfectly okay with him. The world will little note, no long remember what we say here. Tell that to every kid who's had to memorize the Gettysburg Address for infinity. These are the unidentified soldiers' graves. Over 6,000 people are buried here, half of which still remain unidentified. I think it's interesting, though, that it was only Northern soldiers that were allowed into this burial ground, not Southern soldiers unless that happened by accident, which sort of makes me wonder about Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, about us all being brothers, I guess, except in war.